Hey folks, it's Tom, your Frugal Prepper. So, just gonna kind of go over, I guess this is kind of a remote YouTube case study I'm kind of doing. I'm just curious about this problem. So, I'll post links to the videos down below to Dave McNaughton's 2 videos on his blower motor. So, a while back I did that blower motor repair on that Equinox, and he kind of posted this link and made a couple videos about it. It's really interesting. So he plugs in his charger for a phone, and the blower motor stops working. And he's tried a different charger, a different cord. It still does it. He's had it to, I think, the dealership a couple times, trying to look at it and figure out what's going on. I believe the blower motor and the blower motor resistor, which is actually the control module on these, has been replaced. It made no difference. So I just kind of got to thinking, like, what the heck? It's not normal behavior for a car, right? And so I like to figure things like this out. I find it fun. And so I went ahead and printed out some wiring diagrams here, and hopefully this will work. I'll try to make sure we're focused. Maybe zoom in just a hair more. And so what we have here is there's different cigarette lighter diagrams for each of these different types of cars. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have the coupe, but there is a sedan that's D55 where all 3 lighter outlets run across this ground here. There's a sedan here that says it just has auxiliary power outlet C. I don't know if that means rear seat, in the middle. I think he did say he has an outlet in the rear, and maybe that it didn't do it or didn't do it as bad or something. But that's ground 302. But the right and left one in front, and you know the Impalas normally have that little thing in front of the shifter with 2 outlets there. These all tie into ground 200. Now, as far as the power feed, you see these both feed off auxiliary power fuse, 20 amp. So that's where their power comes from. And so then I brought up my ground 200 diagram, and I looked and see ground 200, if we follow this up, ground 200 comes to auxiliary power outlets, and it comes to the blower motor control processor. Okay, so pulled up the blower motor controls, and so kind of went through this, and so this car has the logic of the HVAC control, so it doesn't have like a direct switch that runs down and feeds the blower motor through a traditional resistor pack. So what we have here is this HVAC control module, which has discrete controls on it, right? You know, for your switches and buttons and all that. And if you got the heated seats, it'll have heated seat buttons on it and all that. And then it, of course, talks on low-speed LAN, right? And so that's how it would communicate with all of its other little modules. Like if you had heated seats and all that kind of stuff, it would be on the low-speed LAN. But then you have this logic here. We see that this module is powered off of this one 10 amp fuse, airbag display fuse, and display fuse 10 amp. And so the actual blower power comes direct down this wire and bypasses this control module, but it's on bat A fuse 30 amp right here. So that's different powers than our power outlets. And so now if we look down here, we see that we have this one wire that comes from this, you know, it even says logic, right? Comes from this logic blower motor speed control down to this module, which is the blower motor control processor. And it does say again here blower motor speed control, but I think that's talking about this connection. It looks like if we look at this connector, there's an A, B, C, D, E. So these are like all one connector here that probably plug into this. But I'm not sure. Usually the blower motors kind of have separate connectors, but this could all be in one harness. I think it is because it says this. what we are going to have here is this ground. This is ground 200 that's in common with this guy. And this big splice right here, or this big connection for the ground, all these are coming in together, and you can get some weird crap going on right here if you get the green crusties in this ground eyelet right there, where certain things are backfeeding off of other things because this ground path isn't good. That all kinds of weird stuff. Although this is in the instrument panel because it's G200, right? So just a little bit of knowledge. This applies to GM vehicles. Anytime you see a connector, splice, whatever, and it's labeled in the 100s, it's going to be up in the engine compartment. In the 200s is instrument panel. In the 300s is going to be passenger compartment. The 400s is going to be like rear in the trunk area. Your 5 and 700 are going to be your left, front, and rear door. 700 if there is a rear door, or it would just be 500. And then your 6 and 800 is front and rear on the right. And then your 900 is going to be in the trunk area. Or I'm sorry, 900 is like if you have an SUV with a hatch, it's the hatch. So that's how those numbering schemes work. And so we also see that there is a connector 210 here from the blower motor control processor. And it's black on both sides. And we see there's two spots. They both say the... Oh, okay, that's the windshield wiper. So this connector 210 has these things running through it. It would be interesting to look at this connector 210. I don't think I printed that out, but I will print it out. And I'll attach it to this document for you. Because you can have burnt wires in a connector. So, especially one that's drawing that many amps, right? So, let's see. But I think since these tie directly into the ground, your problem's probably right here. That's what I would guess. So here's how I test this. So if this is one connector, when you unplug it, of course the blower motor is going to not have any power because there's no power coming or ground coming into this control processor anymore because you unplugged it. So there's got to be wires coming out of this connector that maybe go over to the blower motor and then come back into the same connector. But you should be able to get to the blower motor because it says AB here. So that means there's wires separate to the blower motor out of this. And so what I would do is unplug this connector right here. You could do this a couple ways. One, I would first of all plug it in, see that it runs, plug in your charger, make it stop running. Because when you diagnose something like this, you don't diagnose it as it doesn't work when there's something plugged in the cigarette lighter. What's going on with the cigarette lighter? You diagnose it by making it fail and then seeing why the blower motor doesn't run. Just the same as if it never ran or didn't run at all. You want to get it not running and then see why it doesn't run. Don't focus on the other part because you'll never get anywhere from that point of view. You have to test and diagnose what you can see. So make it not run. Come down here. If you can unplug this little connector separately, you can definitely come right here on this blower motor and you can test on this side, which is the orange wire, and make sure you have a ground path. Okay? If you have a good ground path, and test this under load with the test light. So hook your test light to +, and then test, like hook it to battery positive and get some jumper cables, hook them together, whatever you got to do. But get positive and then test that you have a good ground coming here. And then on this one, with this blower motor unplugged when it should be running, you can test and say, hey, do I have 12 volts here? And if I put my test light to ground, will it light the test light? If the blower motor is not running, one of these two has to not have power. Now, if you can't get to this to unplug it, a backup way would be to come to this orange wire, while it's supposed to be running. And if this is plugged in and the blower motor should be running, but you've got it stopped, if you read 12 volts here, if this is 12 volts, you've got a bad ground, because the 12 volts is coming through the motor and keeping this wire powered up. So there's a bad ground from farther up. If you read less than 12 volts here, significantly less, and it might read as a full ground, then you don't have a bad ground, right? You have bad power, right? So if the motor's not running and there's no voltage present here, you've got bad power. If the motor's not running, there's either battery voltage on this orange wire or no voltage or little voltage on this wire. So that would tell you, is it power or ground related? Now this ground comes back to this module internally, and all of its ground runs down to this ground 200. Okay, we see here again is connector 210. So this connector 210 is a little suspicious, but again, I think the problem's at ground 200, because the blower motor does run when the cigarette lighter isn't feeding into ground 200. And so we come to this sheet that will tell you that these grounds 200 and connector 210 are here on 4 and 6, and they run in your instrument panel. And you'll kind of have to compare this diagram with what you got to kind of try to see where at. It looks like maybe you pop something off the middle, like the cover for your HVAC control radio. Probably can get down in here and find these 2 ground points. But do this first and see if you've got a no power coming in problem, which we would have to start coming back this way, which doesn't make sense because there's nothing in common between those till you get all the way back to the fuse box. And these both do run back to the underhood fuse box, so it could be a backfeed thing going on there. Doubt it, but could be. Or if you don't have any ground while this motor's not working. Alright, and then you've got to troubleshoot the ground path all the way back and find out where you don't have ground at. And I would suspect that you're going to find the problem at this ground 200. Just, you don't know till you test. But maybe just do that test for me first. Unplug this connector at the blower if you can. Load test both sides with a test light. And take a voltage measurement too. Right? I would say definitely do that if you can. And even if you can do that, still plug it back in when it should be running and see if you've got 12 volts here or much less than 12 volts. Like, you might still read a volt or two. But you'll probably, if there's not 12 volts here and the motor's not running, then it's a power problem. And it gets its power from here. And we're assuming this isn't bad because it's been replaced. So that's what I'm thinking. I'll scan all these and put them on my Dropbox, and I got some other diagrams you can look through too that show this ground path for 302 and stuff. And I'll look up where the connector. Well, we know where connector 210 is right there. It's on the same diagram. So yeah, C210. So I'll scan all this stuff and send it over to you, and let's see if we can figure this out. Be exciting.